My name is Liz Boulware, and I, along with Molly Zeff, will be hosting our discussion tonight of 12 Angry Men. We've got a lot of participants tonight. We're very excited. I want to cover just briefly some housekeeping. Because there's so many of us, I want to make sure that the group stays muted. So make sure you've got that mute button pushed. And then also, when we come to the time to ask questions, we're going to ask you all to raise your Zoom hands. So take a moment to find out where that Zoom hand might be. So when it comes time for that, you're prepared. A brief note, also, I am coming at you from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am the co-chair of the Braver Angels Alliance of Central North Carolina as well, and have enjoyed Film Club in the past too. So tonight we have something special. We're going to have a presentation from Dr. Annalee McCraw, and we're going to get that going in a minute. And after that, we'll have some time for a brief Q&A with Dr. McCraw. And then after that, we're going to jump right into our discussion of the film, and so that we can all discuss some of the great things we learned from the film. So let's get things going. I'm going to hand this off to Molly Zeff, and you can introduce Dr. McCraw.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Molly. I have been on some film discussions before and led a few, and also been involved with the Gratitude team here. Not involved in a local alliance yet, but hope to be. And I just want to mention also up front, just in case I forget to later, I want to mention that if anyone really likes what you're seeing tonight and you want to be involved in, possibly coordinating a future discussion or even moderating a discussion, definitely be in touch with Liz or I. And especially if you don't like what you see tonight, then you can come help us make it better. So there are two reasons to get involved. So without further ado, I am super, super stoked, super pumped to introduce Dr. Annalee McCraw. She has quite the bio. So basically, a little background here, and I will put this actually in the chat for people who want to read it as well, for anyone who that's easier for. As soon as I finish it. So Dr. Annalee McCraw founded the Educational Guidance Institute, which is EGI, in 1986. If you're keeping track, that was nearly 36 years ago, for the purpose of piloting youth development programs that focus on virtue ethics and character education. In 2014, Annalee was chosen along with 19 other classic movie fans to join Robert Osborne in celebrating the 20th anniversary of Turner Classic Movies. Very exciting. And since 2016, EGI, which she had founded, has published through Amazon 17 classic movie study guides. The study guides feature the greatest films from the golden age of Hollywood and are designed to be taught in any educational setting. And another cool thing about the Turner Classic Movies event that she was at the 20th anniversary of Turner Classic Movies, the film Annalee introduced with Robert Osborne was 12 Angry Men. So she has a special connection to this one, actually. So that is some background. I am going to put that in the chat as well for folks who like to have it to read. And Annalee, would you take it away?
Thank you, Molly, so much. And thanks for that special mention about 12 Angry Men. It was a complete surprise to me. They told us to pick 10 of the movies that we loved. And I had entered with Sidney Poitier's very first movie, No Way Out, which he made in 1950. And then they would pick it for us. And so when they said my job was to introduce 12 Angry Men with Robert Osborne, who's our great late host of Turner Classic Movies, it was just really completely overwhelming to me. And so I'm going to begin the slide with a few points that I want you to bear with me, because I'm giving you some background at the beginning, some great scholars that have helped us so much in our Braver Angels mission, particularly Professor Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Righteous Mind and The Coddling of the American Mind, which he's done. And so I've got some of these points as to why the classic movies are just so absolutely great to overcome divisions, to help us all to kind of get to know each other better in discussion, and even to offer these movies as a way of introducing a whole new civics education to our rising generation. So I'm showing you the pillars here. And I like to think of these great pillars that the film opens with them. They are in City Hall, I believe, in New York City. And these pillars are like the pillars of great bonds of civic friendship that we're going to try to build with this movie and that we're building with Braver Angels. The point here that they're both related and very important. Professor Haidt made this comment, I don't know if American democracy can work if we can't share basic facts. And he made this point in a YouTube video that many of you have probably seen with John Wood and April Lawson, our very active Braver Angels folks. And that is really what we see as we look at 12 Angry Men and think about the movie tonight, how these 12 jurors really came to see facts the same way. And also the G.K. Chesterton quote that reminds us that we're really in a pretty stormy sea right now in our country. And watching these great movies can help us to steady our boats, so to speak. These are the three really tragically wrong untruths that Professor Haidt and his co-author Greg Likianoff speak of. And there really are these afflictions that our young people who grew up with social media have to endure. The generation that's in our high school and college right now grew up with social media, grew up with this whole way of the negative things that sometimes outweigh the positive. And in particular, the points 2 and 3, I think are especially attacked through watching, we can overcome through the movie watching and discussing it together. And that's the idea that we just can rely on our feelings and how we feel right now. This is what our young people are pretty much taught is the way to go. And also the untruth that we can divide up the world between us and them. So I love this quote. I found it at the last minute when I was working on these slides, and it was just the perfect one to say how we do this. And we draw a larger circle around our civil community, a great big circle, bigger than we have right now, where we can discover our common humanity. And isn't it a little bit ironic that we can do this in a movie that just has 12 white men in it? And yet it's a bit of an irony. And yet when we see the anger overcome, the hurts overcome to come to truth, it shows you that it really is about finding our common humanity. I love these words that Winston Churchill said. These are the great things And they are the great things, the great words that we're going to think about as we think about what we saw in 12 Angry Men, particularly freedom and justice. The Upswing, I cannot recommend this book highly enough to you. This upswing is the curve that you see there. The very top of that curve at the peak of the mountain top, so to speak, is the year 1960. And it's just interesting to me when I match up the great classic movies that I've worked on and put in my study guides, and I match that up, excuse me, with the very curve that these scholars found was the greatest time of unity and the community ethic operating in our country. So I really recommend this book to you as almost like a foundational book for Braver Angels. And then I just couldn't resist really showing you the Fremont Theater where I grew up. I saw It's a Wonderful Life in that theater when I was only 7 years old. So now you know how old I am. And the Fremont was the place to go every Saturday afternoon for me. And I saw 12 Angry Men in that theater when I was a senior in high school. I've highlighted for you the cultural piece that is so important for us as Braver Angels, as we seek to model civility and overcoming division in our country. And the movie time, the era of the great classic film, there were really these two periods of time. World War II, I have Jimmy Stewart there sitting behind the counter of his dad's hardware store, kind of shows the community feeling that was always very strong in that time. But also on the other side, the 1963 March on Washington. And that period of time, I'm very proud to say I was coming of age in that time. And in 1960, I was blessed to be an exchange student at Howard University in Washington, DC. And the movement was just starting. And Martin Luther King came to the Rankin Chapel on campus. I was one of about 10 white students, exchange students at Howard that year. And we were from all different parts of the country. I was from Whittier College in Southern California. And Martin Luther King told us, the Howard students, and I was there as part of that group, and he said, you have got to stand up. He said, because your brothers and sisters down in the South, and particularly Fisk University, where my friend had gone, my best friend had actually gone to Fisk the same semester that I was at Howard, and she had written to me about the lunch counter sit-ins. And Martin Luther King said, those kids are putting their lives on the line. And believe it or not, a couple of days later, somebody chartered a bus, and it was sitting right next to the chapel. And they came up to me and they said, "Only do you have enough guts to get on this bus?" And I was able to do it. And we just marched around the White House. But some people might think that we were really exceptional in that time. But if you read The Upswing, you will see that the idea of the fulfilled promise of human rights for everybody was absolutely in the air at that time. And that's the mystery of culture. And that's kind of the mystery that you see in 12 Angry Men too, because it has so much of that feel to it. So thank you for your patience for that little bit of background on this great movie. I love putting these two photos together because that shows you how Braver Angels is going, you know, from deep conflict to paths of debate and discussion that lead to real care for each other and civic friendship. In your questions, I know you're going to be thinking about the qualities of character that each one of these jurors has. And of course, the most exciting thing of juror number 8, Henry Fonda, are his tremendous leadership skills. So I've just reached out a couple of them here. A certain awareness of where he is in the group, you know, and what his job is there, which is to really begin deliberation with people who don't want to deliberate. And he does this with magnanimity, he does it with civility, but he also does it with a great deal of self-restraint. There's times when he could really say something and he doesn't do it, but he does beautifully remind them that they owe this young man something. I just think we owe him a few words, that's all. Juror number 9, that's Mr. Joseph Sweeney playing that part of the old man. And I really love this scene where he just has the courage to really make his case. And it's so out of his human experience that he has that it is the key dialogue that convinces juror number 4, E.G. Marshall, that he really has been wrong. And he's a very rational type of guy, the stockbroker. But this case is so well made by juror number 9 that he has the humility to admit his error.
Could those marks be made by anything other than eyeglasses?
No, they couldn't.
I didn't see any marks.
I did. Strange, but I didn't think about it before.
Well, what about the lawyer? Why didn't he say something?
There are 12 people in here concentrating on this case. 11 of us didn't think of it either.
Not guilty.
What's the matter with you?
I have a reasonable doubt now.
11 to 1.
These are 3 different roles being played here. All of these are so needed, and maybe there would be other aspects that those of you who are with us here can think of these other different crucial things that are being played. But I think of Molly as maintaining order with her natural management skills, you see. And this is what a facilitator has to do. And I have to thank my son, Tom, for pointing this out to me, because I found Martin Balsam somewhat annoying myself. You know how you always have these personal reactions to people, and you have it to characters. And he was the one that pointed it out to me. No, look, Mom, look how he's really keeping things going there. And he's staying objective throughout the proceedings. And then it's always very important, there's going to be this piece of evidence or piece of reflection that is really important for people to know about. And that's juror number 2, John Fiedler's character. And he comes up with something really important and overlooked. And finally, Edward Binns, who plays a very small part in this, but he plays this very crucial role where how do we now probably a Braver Angels meeting would not have and Edward Binns saying, well, if you don't shape up, I'm going to have to punch you out. And maybe there was a more tactful way that he could have said it, but we do need to help each other, and we do need to practice fraternal correction when it's needed. Okay. And I love this guy. He's reflecting of the time. The Hungarian Revolution was 1 month's time, I believe. It was November of 1956. And so the play itself was a teleplay on television. We had television in those days that was live from New York. And that was 1954. But nevertheless, there's this cultural meaning to this man who says, you know, we're notified by mail and we don't know each other. And we don't have any self-interest here, but we have to do our job here together. We have a duty to do that. And then you have these dangers of indifference reflected by somebody who just wants to go to the ball game. What do you do with people like this? They just don't get it. And so you have, again, a very calm Henry Fonda saying to him, he says, well, let's just get on with this. And he says, well, if we lose our voices yelling here, we might as well do it here as at the ball game, and puts him in his place. And I picked these two out for you to think about. There were certain scenes in 12 Angry Men that just cry out to you in the audience as you're seeing it. This is a tipping point. This is going to move us to a different place. And I think that's what we feel when Jack Klugman really speaks up and he says, I'm from the slums and I'm not a criminal. And what he's really doing is saying that the human beings are not robots. They're not bound and shaped and determined by their demographic characteristics. So I think he's the third one that comes in after the old man, Mr. Sweeney's character.
He was born in a slum. Slums are breeding grounds for criminals. I know it, and so do you. It's no secret children from slum backgrounds are potential menaces to society. Now, I think...
Brother, you can say that again. The kids who crawl out of these places are real trash. I don't want any part of them, I'm telling you.
Listen, I've lived in a slum all my life.
Wait a minute.
Please, I've played in backyards that were filled with garbage. I mean, maybe you can still smell it on me.
And it starts to tip. And then the vote is 6-6. And here's where you see in this expression on Henry Fonda's face is such determination. And he knows the vote is 6-6, and now's the time to press for the good. And he says, it's time to take another vote. For juror number 3, this great performance of such a gifted actor, Lee J. Cobb. And we come to just know him as a person. We're not happy with what we see, but we do get to know him, and we understand finally the wounds that are so blinding him.
But what about all the other evidence? What about all that stuff? The knife, the whole business?
Well, you said we could throw out all the other evidence.
Well, what do we do now?
You're alone.
I don't care whether I'm alone or not. It's my right.
It's your right.
Well, that's it. That's the whole case. Well? Say something!
You lousy bunch of bleeding hearts. You're not going to intimidate me. I'm entitled to my opinion. Rotten kids, you work your life out.
No. Not guilty. Not guilty.
And I put the beautiful thing of Plato's Cave here because to me, watching a great movie like 12 Angry Men is like we are all kind of climbing out of our, I don't know, dark place of media division and political division and so on. And we're coming out into the sunlight to look at the realities, and we all see them. So Plato said we must philosophize with our whole soul, and 12 Angry Men allows us to do that. I wanted to point to you some of the other wonderful movies that kind of do the same thing as 12 Angry Men, make a different way. And they have a way of teaching us a kind of renewal of what we love in our community, in our country, the civility and civic friendship. So this is coming to the completion of the presentation. I wanted you to see these two men, a little older, Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart. And this book Scott Eyman wrote is a beautiful book that talks about the friendship of these men for 50 years. And they were young actors together in the Princeton Players in the 30s. They go on to be movie stars. They go on into their old age together, sharing vegetables from their garden in their homes in Beverly Hills. But Jimmy Stewart was the conservative in both religion and politics, and Henry Fonda was the liberal in both religion and politics. And both of these men, they loved each other, they loved their country, and they loved their craft. And there's some tips on how they could have this great friendship that kind of tie into the Braver Angels mission. So finally, I'm able to send to you, if you want to send me an email, I have it there for you. And the greatest way to apply these lessons, these civic lessons for young people in your life, high school, middle school, college, young adult, is Jonathan Haidt's Moral Foundations Theory, which I applied to Mr. Smith in our last Braver Angels presentation. And I'm very, very happy to send that to you just on request by email. I'm very happy to do that. And the study guide that I did called Liberty and Justice for All has in it, it's on Amazon, and it has Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 12 Angry Men, and some of these other films we've talked about. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for listening to a little bit more than maybe just the movie, but I think you probably agree with me that it's good to have a kind of a way that we can fulfill our Braver Angels mission with this film. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annalie. Really appreciate it. We do jazz hands here versus clapping. So awesome.
That's
We're going
beautiful.
to just take, maybe 2 or 3 questions for Annalie. If you have a comment, go for it. Just because there are so many of us, there was a good turnout tonight. Try to keep your question, if you can, do about 30 seconds, a minute or so. And Annalie will answer those. And then what we'll do after that is we'll switch into just the normal kind of like film discussion where we ask questions and people discuss them and we'll ask you questions as the audience. So if you have questions for Annalie, go ahead and click raise your hand, which is on the black bar. It's raise hand on the bottom of the screen. Like I said, we'll take 2 or 3. Also feel free to comment. Awesome. Forrest, go for it.
Hey there, everybody. Annalie here. I'm over in the Puget Sound area. I guess the question I've got is for younger people who don't relate to black and white movies, are we seeing any really solid, more current examples as well? I think I just love 12 Angry Men. Thank you for the nice analysis.
Well, I stick pretty much to the classic movies for a lot of reasons. I think there are wonderful, wonderful movies coming out. But Forrest, I emphasize these classic movies of this time because of their cultural significance. They were part of the time that Robert Putnam's talking about, where we did have a community ethic. And so it's kind of reflected in the movies themselves, even in the collaborative way of the movies of the day. If you look at the background, for example, on 12 Angry Men, you see how carefully they had to work together as an ensemble cast. And in the movies of today, you hardly even see supporting actors a lot of the times. So that's one point about that, that there's a way that the movie is done that even kind of upholds the idea of community. And I really don't think our young people know what community is. I think they were born after the time when we really had community in this country. And so if we can share with them, even if they don't want it at first, or they have a reaction, but my experience has been that if it's kind of like a discovery, they start to be drawn into the films because they're participants. Whereas the newer films, very often, Forrest, I think, we're more like observers being entertained. And these older movies, yes, they don't have the excitement and the color and everything, but they can draw people in. They have the power to do that. So,
well said. Thanks very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to call on Jennifer Lopez, who is our famous guest, I suppose. Yeah, please go for it.
Annalie, I just wanted to confirm that in your study guide, there are links to the other movies that are free. I love that the 12 Angry Men, you created a link so that anybody could watch it. Is that the same for the other movies in your movie guide?
All my movie, the study guides do not.
Study guide, forgive me.
Right, they don't specifically link in the study guide itself. You get that on Amazon, and you have to go ahead yourself and stream it or get a hold of it or use a DVD. So it's not tied to the actual movie itself. The study guides give basically I would say basically it's to give the people doing it, whether they're parents, grandparents, teachers, that they will become the film expert that they need to be to put that on. So it's got all the characters, the background of the film, all of that. I don't know if I answered that right.
Absolutely, you did. What I got back is, although the 12 Angry Men, you gave us a link that made it free, the other ones may not be. So that was exactly what I wanted to know. Thank
Well,
you.
okay, well, there's on my website, I will tell you this. I did a lot of them for free download. I didn't just want to have people have to buy the guides on Amazon. And so if you go on my website, educationalguidanceinstitute.com, and you go up into the menu, you'll see, I think 12 Angry Men is in there, and there's a number that it's just a free download. You just click it and you download it.
Okay, I'm looking now. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And this isn't exactly what Forrest was asking for, I realized, but I did go ahead, if you haven't seen it, and put a link to the remake of this film from 1997.
Wonderful.
Some friends of mine said it was really good, and it's also racially diverse, which the first one being from the 50s obviously wasn't at all. But if you are interested at all, that came highly recommended to me.
I think there are so many really great ones. I'm just not very good an expert on those, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Molly.
Yeah, definitely. I'm no expert either. So, well, thank you, Annalie. So we're going to move into the open discussion part of the night. For people who haven't been to a Braver Angels film club event before, just bear with me for a moment. So I know some of you probably come every month and some of you are here for your first time. So basically, Liz and I will trade off asking some different questions of the whole group. Again, just raise your hand. If for any reason you have trouble with the technical side of things, or if you just really don't want to talk aloud, that's totally fine. Go ahead and raise your hand, and then just private chat me your question in Zoom. On chat, you can actually select me, Molly, Zeph, and send just me a chat. And then I'll call on you to ask that, or I'll say your question aloud, I mean. Instead of having you have to talk. If there's any reason, like if you're with a kid, or if like you're at work and you're kind of multitasking, just let me know. Happy to help out. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. Oh, we already hold off actually on raising hands just yet, because I'm going to actually ask the first question here. So we're going to start really high level actually, and kind of do some collective, work around what exactly, why we might have even chosen the film, basically. So this film obviously relates heavily to Braver Angels themes, or we wouldn't have, chosen it, right, for tonight. So what I want to ask first of all is, in your mind, when you were watching it and when you thought about it, reflecting on it later, how did you feel like the film overall related to the Braver Angels mission, to themes within our organization, or any of your work specifically within Braver Angels? So we want to pull out some of those themes. Then our later questions will all touch on individual themes or the mission. But what did you think about how the film related to the Braver Angels work that we do? I'll give people a moment to think about that.
Okay, I see hands. Linda Legg.
I think the whole idea of or the concept of listening and listening deeply, and also fostering civil dialogue came out in the movie, and I think those are definitely Braver Angels themes.
Yeah, for sure. Any others want to throw one in? Kathleen, I'm guessing. Go for it.
Kathleen, following what the other lady said, yes, of course. The other thing that I'm new to Braver Angels, by the way, only just a few months, so come from that perspective. The issue of neutrality. That I watched a different film. I didn't watch Peter Fonda. I think it was Jack Lemmon, actually, or someone else. I got a different version of it. He repeatedly said, I don't know if the guy's guilty or innocent. She said, he deserves some time. And I never know at the very beginning whether he did take a position. I felt that. So the issue of neutrality in the face of such intense polarization for me stood out very crucially. So easy to go into, as the movie showed, the attacking and the responding and the response spiraling down. So that issue of neutrality stood out for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And by the way, if people want to respond to anything in the chat, you're also welcome to. And Helena, you are next.
What struck me is the calmness and sort of a detachment. I mean, clearly he seemed involved with it, but he came with a tone of detachment and not, not committed to his ideas, as Kathleen said. And also he was reading the room. I thought, from his eyes, he was kind of trying to figure out where other people were coming from. And he had that emotional intelligence of sort of giving people space and letting them come to the decision, but not try to force them to change their mind, but allow them, if they were to change their mind, to change it themselves. So they would feel that they were the catalyst for the change.
Had myself muted there. Thank you so much. Definitely. And I think, Rebecca, you are next.
Yeah, I just, one note I wrote down is that we tend to look for those details that confirm our version of things. And so I felt like the uphill battle that Juror 8 or Henry Fonda's character had was to try to get people to move outside of their, for whatever their motivation, what their version of truth was.
Mm-hmm. That actually relates to our next question, which I'll get to in a moment, about version of truth. Elizabeth or Liz, I think. I'm not sure which
Yes.
you are next. Yeah.
Liz is fine. I thought one of the most powerful scenes was toward the end when one by one, everyone turns their back on the juror who is ranting and communicates that our standard of behavior now, we have finally collectively figured out, is respect and civility, and that kind of rant is simply not okay.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And Lisa? Lisa, go ahead and unmute yourself.
There was complete polarization in that room. I mean, there was so much in that room. Certainly by the time they got to 6-6 vote. And I found it very interesting how they each came in with such strong opinions, and there wasn't even that much respect sometimes between the different jurors, but somehow they were open enough to hear one another and to, not by trying to change each other's mind, but just kind of listening. They all came to the same conclusion by the end. And I'm not sure if we've reached that, to tell you the truth, in Braver Angels. I thought it was a wonderful, it showed how something like that ideally would be accomplished.
Yeah, definitely. And let's see, Jonathan, you are next.
Very quickly, I think it was a perfect example of why wisdom and just decisions require a group, because every one of those jurors was drawn, that the characters were drawn in a way that you knew what their biases were. And it took all of them to put their heads together to come up with a just and wise decision. The character that Jack Klugman played, who was from the streets, and he knew nobody who was from the streets ever whoever fought anybody with a knife would ever raise it above their heads. That's just, he showed that's just not how it's done. And everyone had their own little, it took all of them to reach a wise decision. None of them could have reached a wise decision by themselves because none of them knew enough or had enough experiences to dispense justice without bias. So it was beautifully done.
Yeah, there's that energy of collective truth there for sure. We're just going to take two more, actually, Lonnie and then Nancy. Sorry to the other people, but feel free to put in the chat. Lonnie, is that how I pronounce your name?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought the film really reflects Braver Angels workshops, which I've done, moderated a lot of them. And people come in with these very these strong assumptions that they're sure of. And then slowly they move toward questioning their assumptions and thinking critically. And somehow the Henry Fonda facilitator kind of tickled their curiosity muscle, and so was able to bring them to that point of questioning their assumptions. So
yeah, absolutely.
Braver Angels.
Yeah, similar. And Nancy, you are going to tie up this question for us, but other people should feel free to write in the chat.
Yeah, it's very similar to what Lonnie said, but at the beginning, they all voted that all but him, Henry Fonda voted that he was guilty. And Henry Fonda was able, being creative, he said, well, if we just go and tell them that we're finished, they're going to make us come back here anyway. So let's get together and start talking. And that's how it all started. And then one at a time, people spoke up when they didn't before. So I thought it took a leader, someone to say, wait a minute. And thank goodness there was someone like that there.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to move on to the next question. If your answer relates to this, feel free to keep your hand raised. So people have talked about this idea of coming to a collective conclusion, of finding a collective truth. And so the next question we wanted to pose has to do with that idea. So one of the things that really struck me was the humility of the main character, who says, I don't know what truth. He literally says the words, I don't know what the truth is. And when people ask him, is he guilty or not guilty? He just keeps saying, I don't know. And that struck me because he's not trying to have a conviction, no pun intended there on that word, but he's not trying to have a conviction about the conviction. He's just saying, let's talk first. Let's look for doubt and, consider the doubts he already did see. So I felt like the line, I don't know what the truth is, was a really telling one and a really powerful, almost metaphor for the kind of work that people do in Braver Angels. And especially like in the context of debates and film discussions, when people are reaching and getting towards a greater truth because of understanding each other's opinions. So I just wanted to ask folks to share, maybe a couple people to share, how does this idea of not knowing the truth, just being willing to say that, how does that relate to the Braver Angels approach, whether in workshops, discussions, or just other events you've been to? Yeah, Dee, go for it.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I've not participated in any of Braver Angels workshops. I'm a new person. I'm familiar with some of your ideas, and I'm very familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I was struck also by what you were just describing, and I think the character of Henry Fonda basically comes back to one structure over and over again, which is what if. He injects the hypothetical, and he challenges each of the other jurors to think of other things that would explain what had happened. So he keeps saying, what if, what if, what if? And that one line opens up the minds pretty much of each of the other jurors. So that's one thing I'd like to mention. The other thing I'd like to mention, however, is in a courtroom situation, the people who have showed up for jury duty, when you're summoned, you're legally responsible, but some people don't show up or get out of it. But for those who show up, they are committed to the possibility that they will serve on a jury, which means that they have to sit there and express their ideas, whatever they are, and either come to a consensus of unanimity or come to the consensus that they don't agree, and therefore it's a hung jury. And so my question is that a likely situation for most people when they are in highly divisive conversations, that they will play out within real time, the time that's necessary to have that discussion? I think it's kind of unique to jury situations, but in most of my experiences, people are not willing to spend that time to think critically about whatever the matter is. And increasingly so, we're such a rapid society. You know, we think in sound bites, we talk in sound bites. I just wonder whether what we saw in a courtroom can be applied in in other situations. Those are the two thoughts I wanted to share. The what if as a good method of drawing people into critical thinking, and whether this really applies to other situations.
Yeah, thank you. The way I think that a big part of the movie for me was how we argue well and how we argue really poorly, and how the way that we argue poorly can further divide groups that are, you know, pretty friendly. You know, when one of the first scenes you see in the movie, I'll just point out, is two people working together to close a window. They actually show them closing the window together, and then they show it during the rainstorm as well. And it's like a small, easy shared task. And then there are some other moments like that. And then of course, you know, the breakdown of relationships happens for the first, you know, building up to the climax, the first half and more. Cynthia, I want to bring you in.
Hello, thank you, Molly. I've been on jury duty a few times. And one of the things I noticed about the movie was that their approach was very disorganized until the few of the people sort of created an organization about it. One time I was on a jury where it started similarly, with a lot of people sort of going, well, you know, the person sounds guilty because I heard this and this and this, so he must be guilty. Or sort of an emotional, well, this makes me feel bad, so he must be guilty. And then, you know, other things. Anyway, but because of the way it was set up, our conversation was required to break the question, not just say guilty or not guilty, but break it down into little tiny pieces. Was damage done? Was the damage done by this person's action? Did the person know they were going to cause damage by what they do? Because it wasn't like, a, gosh, I want to go cause damage. It was, you know, something different. If they didn't know, could they have known? Would a reasonable person be able? So they like took the bigger question of what the situation is and broke it down into little slivers. And actually we were required to answer each sliver of a question separately and agree, all 12 of us, on every sliver of the question. And I'm just thinking in terms of sometimes maybe when you have a big question that's emotional and fuzzy, maybe we can break it down into slivers.
Yeah, I love that. That idea of chipping away at a case is also building up justice. Like you're chipping away at the mountain of the case, a mountain of evidence, to create more justice, piece by piece. So it's a great visual I was thinking of during your answer. Thank you for that. We're just going to take a couple more because we have some really other exciting topics and questions. Josie, go for it. And let me know if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, please.
You pronounce it.
You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. The premise of the court, the jury had to decide if he was guilty beyond reasonable doubt. And that I thought made it easier. I mean, it was still a huge task, but I think about being in arguments or settings where there's people who have wildly different views. If I thought, I don't have to say I'm right, they're wrong, but is there some reasonable doubt that I might be wrong and what they're saying could be right? I thought was just the court setting was a great way to do that. You could still believe he might have been guilty, but you weren't, all you were doing is saying he was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You weren't convicting him. So it made it easier. And I thought the idea could be used to depolarize other things. That by giving up some of our convictions doesn't mean we lose our whole fight. It just means we're open to looking at other sides. So I thought it was a great way to use in Braver Angels. That's it.
Great, thank you. And in case you didn't see it, Dee, some folks are wanting to have your second question raised. So if you could actually put how you shared it in the chat, that would be great. And we can
I'm
try to
doing
get
that
people
right
to-
now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awesome. Edna will be our last one for this question. I always hate to not go to everyone just because we have some good stuff to get through. Edna, go for it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think those are wonderful insights, by the way. There was a question asked before about the difference between the type of discussion we might have and a jury situation. And I think one difference is that in that film, there were no polarized beginnings. It was more a matter of the obvious. And watching it, at first it looked very obvious that the evidence was there. But the obvious turned out not to be true or very doubtful. And then people were gradually coming to be open to that. So I thought that was a really interesting point as well. And it does, even if it's not exactly analogous to what we might be doing, it's, it's another dimension of the film.
Yeah, thank you, Edna. I want to hand the mic over to Liz to bring in our next question, which is a really, really powerful one for today's context.
Okay, thank you, Molly. We've had some really great conversation here. So pivoting a little bit this question, and I put it in the chat, the widely accepted opinion in the jury room was guilty at the very beginning. Initially, only one juror stood up and said not guilty, causing the other jurors to treat him as an outcast. I was wondering if we could think about, where do you see people being treated as outcasts today because they don't hold the widely accepted opinion of the group? And then what does this film teach us about making those initial judgments? Give everyone a moment to ponder that one. Linda, did you want to answer that question, or did you have your hand up for the last one?
I'll answer this one if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, and it actually relates to the other one before. I think people are afraid of being judged, so they will tentatively step into an opinion, voicing an opinion, and obviously people follow along a curve of being very strongly convicted on an idea or not strongly convicted on an idea, and so we'll move along the curve based on where they think the majority is and where they think if there's a consequence to being an outcast. And I think in 12 Angry Men and also in Braver Angels, are people willing to believe in something, express a belief in something, and acknowledge there's nothing bad's going to happen to me if you judge me badly. I won't lose my home. I won't lose my job. I'll just lose this side of the argument for the time being. And Henry Fonda was willing to accept that, or Juror 8 was willing to accept, I don't have anything to gain or lose by voting up or down on this kid. I just know that I have some doubts, and my doubts tell me I have to say not guilty. And I'm going to take a chance. And if you don't like me for it, so you don't like me for it. I'm not going to take it personally. And that's where I think Braver Angels really helps, is how to teach us how not to take someone not agreeing with us personally. And to say, you know, I said what I said, I believe in it, let's talk. And I believe that people will be willing to take the time if given the opportunity.
Thank you for that, Linda. Next, we've got Helena. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Elena.
Elena, thank
I would
you.
say definitely if you're unvaccinated, you're considered a heathen or whatever. On the other side, you're sheep and stupid and just, you know, conform to any of the mainstream medias on the other side. There always seems to be a scapegoat, and there's a lot of vilifying. And I've got to say, from my own personal opinion, I felt that a lot, because my opinion's actually a sort of a hodgepodge, and I have felt ostracized. And but I feel much better just speaking my truth. But I absolutely feel there's a lot of vindictiveness and real fear out there that, you know, people who are unvaccinated are causing the virus. And, you know, even as far as a telephone call, you know, I mean, how can you spread it there? I mean, it kind of gets, you know, just not rational at some point.
All right, thank you for that. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback a little on what Helena just talked about. Not specifically about the vaccination, but about feeling ostracized or not within Braver Angels workshops. I think that happens more often than we realize. It has certainly happened to me at times. I think it's happened to other people within my alliance at times. And to look at the jurors in this movie, The 12 Angry Men, it's very interesting. I don't remember who mentioned it before. Maybe it was Dee, about the fact that the Henry Fonda character was told, he said, look, they're just going to send us back. We better talk because we have to solve this thing. We have to come up with some unanimous decision, or this whole thing is going to be, you know, nothing. So they were basically forced into a situation where they had to listen to each other. That's not the case in Braver Angels. We come in and we are not forced to do anything. So we can listen or we can not listen. We can come in with our very strong opinions and leave with our same strong opinions and not really have any effect on anybody else. I just think it's a different mode, because there's not that expectation of not changing people's, you know, the idea of not changing people's minds, but just listening and not really necessarily feeling you have to come up with something.
Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Liz, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to thank you for that observation. And there have been discussions within our alliance, and I think maybe the bigger organization, about how, you know, do we actually look to tackle some problems and come up with some solutions together. So maybe that's a next step. And Molly, go ahead.
Well, Linda, you're welcome to go, and then we can switch questions actually, or switch topics. but it's related to actually some things that Lisa said for our next one. Linda, go for it.
Well, go ahead. If you have something to tag along to Lisa, go ahead.
It's no, it's a Dee's question.
A
with
change
little
in
bit of
topic?
back- Yeah, so go
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
I was just going to say that another place where you see that happening, where there's a dominant prevalent thought, and you see the ostracism or the shaming of others. Sadly, it's in church. That you'll see people of whatever in the faith. If you are in church and you express a opinion or that's maybe a little divergent from what is being espoused, it's easy to see people being ostracized, or even other faiths being marginalized if they're not conforming with your faith. So that was my comment.
Thank you for sharing that. And I want to bring in Dee's question because it's super relevant to some things that Linda and others have been saying, Lisa and others have been saying. So Dee was asking about, how much we can relate this movie to our actual lives, both, I think, daily lives and, family lives and so on, but also to be fair, to our work in Braver Angels as well. I do want to mention per Lisa's comment that I have heard people, and I felt this too, say explicitly, whether at BA debates or discussions, that they felt themselves shift either right or left because of their interaction with people in Braver Angels. So I definitely have heard that happen over a number of, again, debates and discussions. I mean, debates especially because people are bringing really powerful evidence from both sides of a discussion of an issue, or multiple sides. They're never just two. So I do want to just throw out these questions. So I'm going to go back up there and state it the way she wrote it. She was asking whether the time necessary and required, right? They're stuck in a room together, right? In a jury setting to come either to consensus or a hung jury can really be applied in other situations. Meaning, are most people willing to sit down together to spend the time necessary to really hear one another and come either to a consensus or to mutual disagreement, but with respect? And I'm going to put that again in the chat, and so people don't have to scroll up. And feel free to draw on both external to BA and internal to BA experiences answering her question.
I've seen that to BA, to Braver Angels, right, especially if you have small.
So feel free to raise your hand to speak to, yep, go ahead, Rebecca.
So last Friday, I had 4 of my liberal friends over, and I talked about my involvement with Braver Angels, and they said, "Now, what is that organization again?" And I explained it, and explained that through it I'd gotten to know more people from the other side of the political fence, and it even befriended them. And the more I talked about this, the more the look of horror kind of came over their faces. It's like, you're actually friends with Republicans who voted for Trump. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, they're my friends. They're good people. We have personal relationships, and it's that basis for the friendship. I don't, it's our personal connection. So I still had to work on them a little bit. And I kept talking about how in Braver Angels, the point is to discuss the issues, and it's not to erode our respect for one another. It's actually to build respect for one another. And they still looked a little doubtful, but I just want to end this little vignette on this. So the 2 women looked at me and said, "Is it all women?" And I'm like, I'm not sure what prompted that question, but as a matter of point, I would say that I believe that men and all the genders can discuss things with respect, and leave the discussion maybe disagreeing in their opinions of the situation, but maintaining the relationship. So that was just something I thought about as these people were arguing in this room.
Okay, I see Donna's hand up.
Well, first of all, I am so grateful to Molly and Liz for moderating this discussion. They're doing a fantastic job, aren't they? Love it. So in addressing Dee's question, we just so happen in Braver Angels to have an experience called the Common Ground Workshop. And in the Common Ground Workshop, we get together, a even number of people who have different views on a subject. And the very first subject we treated was abortion, right? Went right with the biggie at the beginning. But people voiced their opinion about the issue, wide range of opinions. And then the moderator then sees if they can if they can agree on whatever the view is, if people can agree. And if they don't agree, then that particular opinion is not part of the consensus. But in the case of abortion, they came to consensus on 20 statements they could make about abortion that they could agree upon. But it took a lot of sitting and listening and hearing what other people had to say patiently, letting people talk. And so that's called the Common Ground Workshop. So yes, Virginia, there is a way within Braver Angels to do that.
Thank you, Donna, for that little plug. And I'll just put out there that there are workshops constantly happening. So if you ever want to look up one, they're on the events page on how to depolarize conversation. I want to bring in Courtney. Go for it, Courtney.
I thank you. That kind of answered it for me. And Ms. Marmaduke, I just really loved your story. And I guess all I wanted to say really is that my time with Braver Angels has been, I think, a year and a half. It's been pretty much pandemic, and so most of it's been online. And I've kind of, managed to bring a lot of these skills into my life, my friend life. But I had been putting off, stop and start with, kind of getting involved in an alliance here in Hudson Valley, New York, where I live, and got pumped today and sent out some emails. And I think, Rebecca, what you're doing, and definitely what Donna just suggested, that's the way to go, just face to face, getting it done in person if possible. But this is awesome. So anyway, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Courtney. And lastly, Forrest. Actually, Forrest and then Edna, and then I think we're going to shift gears here a little bit.
Thank you, Molly. Hey, guys, as a token man, one of these angry men, that's a joke, by the way, what I see after all these years of men's work and other stuff that is going on is how few people really have an experience that it's safe to let in someone else's different opinion. So few of those experiences add up to, I better protect my position, my culturated manhood, and if I'm wrong, damn it, I'm going to fight to the, and all of that insane male programming that many of us might have. I think it blocks the possibility, as someone said, as Linda Bergovsky just observed. Linda, your point was, you think women are more apt to take rational conversation and make a shift. Unfortunately, so many of the people that are locked into their positions out in the public eye, a lot of them are men, aren't they? And that's part of the neurosis of mankind. So anyway, I'd like to believe that as we have more of these experiences, that it's safe to listen, it's safe to move, it's safe to open up and drop the frickin' armor. Anyway, that's part of my work out here in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Edna, you're going to wrap us on this question. And then I have a sort of subtopic that another question of ours fits really nicely into this conversation thread. Go for it, Edna.
Well, I think that happens to us women too. These are dangerous times, and it's easy to feel afraid. But my only question
We can't hear you, Edna.
Move into your microphone, Edna.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Where do we find that common ground workshop that somebody was just talking about? It sounded really interesting. I'd like to join it.
We
can have someone put it in the chat. Yeah.
Can you see the chat?
Excuse me?
Edna, can you see the chat on the Zoom link on the Zoom? And we'll link it in the chat.
Okay, great.
Oh.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask a question that is sort of a subset of this one in a way. So let's say you're in a room, like the juror's room, and someone, starts yelling his head off like that one juror did near the end, and just makes you so angry you just want to walk away. And that is exactly what most of the men at that table did, right? Almost all of the men walked to the sides and turned their back to him. And that was a killer moment of the movie, man. I love that moment because it is exactly what we shouldn't do, right? It's hard not to when people are yelling and angry. It's not hard not to turn away. So the question I want to ask everyone is, whether using, skills you've gotten from a Braver Angels workshop, or honestly just skills you've gotten from, having healthy discussions and arguments and debates in your own life, what would you do? How would you respond to the angry juror near the end? How would you use skills you've developed at workshops, or just, again, skills from arguing with family members, perhaps, or as I like to say, debating with family members, take out the tone there. So I'm going to dump that in the chat, and I want to just ask y'all to share any reflections on how you would have responded in that moment, or how you'd like to think you would respond at least. Okay. I'm seeing a couple folks who have spoken before. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to chime in? I love hearing from everybody who has. I just want to see if people are feeling a little shy. Kathleen, we haven't heard from you in a while. Then we'll go back to order again. Go for it, Kathleen.
If I had the presence of mind, and if I understood and listened carefully to what the person was screaming and off about, if I could ascertain the pain that drove the anger, I would give some sort of reflective comment about the pain that drove the anger with some sort of compassion or understanding, or at least acknowledgement, if I could.
Thank you, Kathleen. And Courtney, I believe you were next in the order before. Your mic is still off.
Yeah, sorry, I had I go you go ahead. I didn't mean to have my hand up. I apologize.
Okay, go for it, Jonathan.
That the turning their backs scene in 12 Angry Men, what precipitated that was the gentleman's argument was racist. It was overtly racist. And in that panoply of different people, the turning the backs moment was everyone in that room who turned his back rejected this argument that all these people are like that as a justification for convicting him. So that was a powerful scene of a diverse, widely diverse group of people with widely varying opinions on why they thought he was guilty or not guilty, all rejecting the argument that man made that he's guilty because he's a Puerto Rican, and those people are like that. It was the universal rejection of that racist argument that was the impetus behind the scene of all those men turning their backs.
Yeah, definitely. Liz, do you want to switch to another question or topic here?
I'm happy to follow this thread, Molly, if you have some follow-up.
Yeah,
questions.
I have a follow-up related question. You mentioned the man who was seen as, well, the person who was on trial was seen as the other, was the them. When it struck me that there are kind of two groups of them, and I'm not going to share what I'm thinking. I'm going to see if we can tease it out. There are two kinds of thems who are related to the them in the movie. So people keep saying in the movie, them, and they do this and they do this. You know what they're like. When we're in a Braver Angels setting, who is the them? Who's the other in there? I think there's an obvious answer, and I still want to hear it. And then there's a less obvious answer. And I mean, there's obviously no wrong answer here too. You can have a third answer that I might not have come up with as well. So this is a little more challenging, but yeah, who is the them here? Lisa, go for it.
Okay, I don't know if this is what you were thinking of, but what pops into my mind immediately is that some people are looking more at hard facts and data to prove, basically to prove their opinions, and others are also relying on deep-seated values and just beliefs as well as the facts and the data. And so I think that that's really an issue. And I think that sometimes that's why when we heard the story about the liberals saying, how could you be friends with a Trump person? I think it has more to do with not that they voted for Trump or that they, but the values that that represents and the fact that they voted for him versus somebody else, or it's the values. To me, it seems like the values as well as the facts, but I think those are two different ways of looking at things.
Really well said. Thank you. Since there aren't hands raised, I'll put out there that for me coming into an organization, actually, Linda, you go first. I'd rather you speak than me. Go for it.
I was thinking that in the context of Braver Angels, the other are those who just don't want to engage. You know, when I talk to people about maybe joining Braver Angels or, you know, what Braver Angels does, I get sometimes I get the reaction that, you know, I don't want to be changed and I don't really want to engage with people who are, you know, have that other opinion. Or, you know, that's who I think the other is in the context of Braver Angels. When we're in the Braver Angels meeting, I've never been in a meeting where people haven't been willing to just be respectful and listen, even if they, you know, respectfully disagree.
Yeah, definitely. And you two came up with very good answers that I hadn't even thought of. So thank you. I was thinking of like when you, before you're in a Braver Angels workshop, before you kind of get into the group, that them can often just be people across the political spectrum from you. And then you kind of de-otherize people because you're working together to kind of find a common ground and kind of find where the high level shared values are. Often we've said in Braver Angels, like, we agree on what the issues are and that they are problems. We don't always agree on the policy of how to solve them, right? So I kind of figure out where the shared high level values or problems are is a sort of Braver Angels ideal, at least. The other then was often for me, like, I think when people come into conversations and debate politics that affect certain groups in our society, like say minorities or the poor, you know, people, you know, like that man who was saying like, I'm in the slums. It's like, you know, the way that the trial affected the other man from the slums is that he didn't get a fair trial, right? So I think oftentimes we come into conversations thinking, assuming that other people have certain opinions about a given them, about a given other. And then we have to talk to each other to realize they don't have those opinions about that other group. And it's only through talking that we can get there.
Yeah, and Molly, and just pulling on that thread a little bit, I mean, I think one thing that really landed on me is you start out with 12 Angry Men, but when you listen to them and you got their full story, you realize this just wasn't 12 white men. You realized it was an immigrant. It was someone who grew up in poverty. It was someone who was having deep relationship issues with his son. And, you know, you really dig in that these are all individual humans that are bringing themselves to this jury, and they're not just these identities. So that really, and that's something I've learned from Braver Angels, is not to look at somebody and make assumptions, but really listen and get their story and background to understand why they, you know, come at things a certain way.
Yeah, definitely. I am going to bring up, Liz, is it all right if I introduce one final question and just take maybe one answer?
Yes.
Okay.
We're coming, it's 9:27.
Yeah,
so.
I'm gonna throw out one question, and would love to hear at least one answer from someone. Then we'll share the next movie. We'll do a big reveal at the end, the big reveal every time. So I noticed that personal story played a really powerful role in this. Both the personal story of someone who had not obviously had a lot of interactions with, you know, this certain minority group and was kind of, you know, just blaming them as a group because of his lack of interaction or because of his negative interactions. And then personal story played a role because that one juror was a holdout because his own negative relationship with his son, abandoning their father-son relationship, was influencing him to not to not see that the kid could be potentially not guilty. Personal story plays an extraordinarily powerful role in both debates and discussions and workshops and so on. I would love to hear how did personal story for you, or rather, how do you use or aspire to use your personal story to help you better understand other people's viewpoints in Bravery Angels? To some extent to share yours, but also how do you use personal story to convey your opinion on an issue or to learn other people's opinions and better understand them? Yes, Linda, please take us away.
So I am a member of a group called Jews United for Justice here in Maryland, and we are a social justice organization that follows Jewish teachings. And we have every year meetings with our state delegates about issues of importance to the group. And we tee up our discussions always with a personal story about how those issues have affected us. And that includes criminal justice reform, immigration reform, paid family and medical leave. There's a whole litany of issues. Those personal stories force us to not make this about other people, but about all of us, even though I'm not an immigrant. I'm second generation of an immigrant family. So we all have that personal story, and the legislators tell us that those personal stories and the way we've conveyed them make a lot of difference and differentiate our advocacy efforts. They have more value and credibility and realism than just talking points. So that's where personal stories have been used, and we were effective in making some major wins in the legislature so far this year.
Thank you for sharing that. And I found really similarly, I cannot talk about certain issues like, for immigration or oppression abroad and the way we play a role in that without talking about, family things. As someone who had family killed in World War II and so in the Holocaust and so on, I think that personal story always needs to come up, because otherwise people can't understand why are you personally so deeply passionate about this. Your passion is misunderstood sometimes as anger or aggression when you don't convey that there's a passion that's stemming from hurt and from pain. So I think it's always important to identify that source of pain for people in understanding their story. And I'm just gonna, on an odd note, I wanna just actually end the discussion and say a huge thank you to everyone who participated, who spoke, who listened. The listening is as important as the talking in these things. I also wanna give a big thanks and big jazz hands, Bravery Angels style, to Onalee McGraw. Dr. McGraw, you did a great job on your presentation. I appreciate you co-facilitating. Also, thanks to her son, Tom. I don't know if he was visually in there, but he also helped with the technical side, as did Janet. Janet, you were an excellent Zoom event manager. Thank you for that. And also want to do a huge thanks to my co-coordinators, Donna, who actually sadly is stepping down and stepping back, but onto very exciting things as well. She'll still be joining us for discussions, but Donna is moving on from her role as a co-moderator, and Liz and I are taking on the moderating role. If anyone wants to join Liz and I promise we're nice and we have fun too. So come have fun with us. You can plan some questions. And if you're not used to moderating, you can kind of take a backseat in the beginning. We're happy to have you join in whatever capacity you're able. And just wanted to announce our next film for February. It'll be near the end of February. We'll have the date in a week or so. The next film is What Killed Michael Brown. So that is coming up. I definitely encourage you to look at the trailer for it. Again, that's What Killed Michael Brown. We'll share info as we always do on how to get that through both email and on our website. And with that, we're going to draw to a close. Thank you. I can't thank everybody enough. Please feel free to give feedback over email or other ways, and we'll definitely take it into account for next time. And huge thanks to everybody for coming.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.